Thank you for tuning into the Island Treasures podcast. We value the insights shared by our guests and host, but it's important to note that their personal experiences are intended to inform and encourage, and not to replace professional, legal, or medical advice. With that, we are ready for today's exciting episode. Welcome to Island Treasures mini podcast for caregivers. This episode is brought to you by Alongside Caregiver Consulting, and I am your host, Alison Van Schie from beautiful Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. In the full episode featuring Valerie Wiens, Valerie shares how she found herself being pulled in many directions as a sandwich generation caregiver. And Valerie knew how to navigate the healthcare system as that was her job. Through the observation of her wise husband, she learned a valuable lesson. Let's take a listen to the lesson that she learned of setting boundaries and how identifying what she could do helped relieve some of the stress and allowed her to be fully present when caregiving.
He suggested to me that I make some boundaries. And I know this is a common thread. There's some excellent books out there. I know you've got a podcast with addressing this because it is so important. But when you say make boundaries, I've always thought of them as you have to defend yourself. You have to put up fences and they have to be like barbed wire. But they're not. And what I found that was that boundaries gave me such freedom. And I will tell anyone about them. I just think that identifying what I can do, like what is in my wheelhouse. Because to be honest, when I would go with my mom, I would do her fingernails. I would organize all her clothes. I sewed all the backs of her clothes. I did a lot of these things and didn't mind. They were not hard for me to do. But feeding her, I didn't like feeding her. I struggled with that one because it's my mom. I could do it with other people, but that one was a struggle. Whereas my dad didn't have a hard time with that, but he couldn't do the other thing. So you might as well identify it. But what the biggest help was, I ended up identifying 3 days a week that I would be there. I'd go from work, I'd eat supper with my dad, and then go feed my mom or change the timing around. I would do any errands. I would sit with them. I would talk to the nurses. I would spend hours, but only 3 days a week. So every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday were mom and dad's. So when I was there, my husband and the kids just knew that they were on their own and they didn't expect me. And when I was home, my parents hopefully knew they were on their own too, although my dad would call with the funniest he wanted Rice Krispies all the time. So, But setting those boundaries was a big deal. It gave me the absolute freedom that I was not obligated to be at the other place where I wasn't. It meant that I could be fully present. And I just think instead of having a victim mentality myself or a martyrdom or feeling always like I had to be on 100% call for everybody, I put things in with little boundaries and boxes, and it worked so well.
Not only did Valerie learn the freedom and strength of using boundaries while caregiving, she combined her personal experience with her professional knowledge of the healthcare system, along with her skills as a creative problem solver. And she wrote a book to help others navigate through the healthcare system and obtain helpful resources.
While I was a case manager, I think the biggest question that I have from people is they'd phone and say, "Hi, I've finally got a case manager. What do we do about mom?" And then I was in the middle of it, navigating things and trying to, I knew a lot about how to access different care in the Valley and in BC, just because I've been a nurse for so long and I worked in community. And I was the person doing applications for long-term care facilities. And so I knew the ins and outs. But once you put on your I'm a daughter hat, I felt almost as lost. And I thought, oh, this is why people call. So I started writing a book and just writing down things that I was learning. But then my mom passed away and I paused it for a while just because it was just too hard to write a book called What Do We Do About Mom when you've just lost your mom? And then I picked it up again later on when I felt a little more comfortable with it. And it's a pretty simple, short little book, and it just has some insider information on how you access the healthcare system, who the different players are, just because sometimes people will use words interchangeably and not quite know who are all these people that come in. Has a bit of work pages like choosing your goals. A lot of people don't. They just want to do everything, and they don't think about what actually is the most important thing, or what does mom think is the most important thing. And of course, mom can mean dad or your spouse or your child or whoever you're looking after, that you're in that position of being a carer and they're the ones that are needing help.
I then asked Valerie to provide a tip for caregivers.
Probably my biggest hope would be that people would use boundaries as a source of strength and a joy, to give you a clear marking of where your gifts are and where you're able to shine, especially if you've got siblings or other people that you've hired. It'd be nice to be in an area where this is what I'm comfortable giving. I like giving this, and this does not tax me. And I can't give this. Like, it's a positive as well as the fence that you push against and say, no, actually, that I'm not comfortable at all with that. And that within that, you'd find joy, because I mean, caregiving is almost inevitable for all of us in some way. And even if your parents' dynamics and the relationship with them has not been a good one at all, then even more so you need boundaries, because what you can give in those situations might be much more restricted, and you might have to hire people or arrange for others. And I'm definitely aware of narcissistic parents or abusive situations where you're not going to put yourself in the giving, or you are in that role and you're drained. Well, you don't have joy in that at all then. So I just, the boundaries that can keep you safe and keep you still giving joy and growing, because it is a growing situation. Caregiving just grows you.
So if you find you're in the midst of a caregiving journey that is growing you and need some information about setting your own boundaries, I invite you to tap into alongsidecaregiverconsulting.ca or keystoneeldercare.com. I recognize how precious your time is, especially as caregivers, and so this mini podcast is designed just for you. And when you have more time, I invite you to listen to the full episode called How Boundaries Provided Freedom in Caregiving, to hear even more helpful information from Valerie. Thanks for listening to this podcast, and to Valerie Wiens, thank you for sharing your valuable insights that helped you through sandwich generation caregiving. See you next episode.